A warm hello to you and thank you for joining us on Lift as we Rise. Communication is a cornerstone of effective leadership, high performance teams, relationships of trust, and of systems of accountability. As leaders, our approach is often to rely on individual styles or on the marketing, HR, or PR people to do the communication. But is that the most effective way to communicate in organizations? In today's FutureThrive SME episode, we speak about empowering organizations through effective communication. I have Graham Ferreira with me today, founder and group chairman of Full Circle Business Communications. Graham, a warm welcome to you, and I'm really, really excited to have this conversation with you today.
I'm pleased to be here.
And how are things doing in Cape Town, Graham?
Well, they're a bit chilly at the moment, but we're still good.
Yeah, well, if you have any rain, please send them our way. Graham, Full Circle Business Communication, it's a really specialized field to be part of, and certainly quite a niche business model. And when I first spoke to you about Full Circle, I was really energized by the prospect that there were specific companies dealing with this. Tell us your story. How did Full Circle Business Communication start, and where has that journey brought you to today?
Well, it started when I was on the Cape Argus as a reporter. I was always interested not only in what we wrote, but also how the public received what we wrote. And I wondered why there were some stories that we didn't think they were that marvelous, but the public thought they were really great. And there were massive feedback on it. And other stories that we thought were absolutely marvelous just fell flat. So we did a lot of research, and what we did was we brought in a very, very primitive form of eye track. It was one-way mirror with 4 cameras behind it. And on the other side was a table with newspapers. And we asked people to come in and page through the newspapers and stop when they found something that was interesting. And what we found that was really interesting was that people stopped almost invariably. Some of them might have stopped at the sports pages, others at the whatever news, but all of them stopped at the people pictures, at the social pages, and they wanted to see if they knew anybody, and if they saw somebody they knew, sort of involuntary, they sort of made a movement forward towards the page. And I put that in the back of my mind, and I thought about it. It also explained why a lot of our news stories that got a lot of feedback had people pictures in them, much more than if it was just a story. So then I got into public relations after that, and obviously I started dealing with companies like DeFi and big manufacturing companies. And what struck me was that there was a very, very, very distinct difference between communicating to staff in the company and communicating to, say, the larger target audience outside the company, which would be their target market for sales. And it wasn't really addressed. It's sort of one size fits all. And I started to have a look at what would be the difference between talking to people in the factory and talking to people out there. And one immediate difference struck me is that there are 2 completely different sorts of communication. One, we sort of categorized as operational communication. And that's communication you need to be able to do your job, what time you have to come to work, how to switch your computer on. You don't have to persuade people to get that type of knowledge, because without that knowledge, they just can't do their job and they wouldn't have a job. The other type of communication is far more subtle. And it's what we maybe loosely in corporate communications call vision, value, and culture. But what it really is changing people's behavior. You want them to do something in a specific way because that's what suits the organization. That's what suits their colleagues. That's how you drive the business forward. And it's that type of communication which is very, very difficult to get across because you have to persuade people that this is in their interests. So that was one of the things that drove me towards saying, hang on a minute, there's got to be a specialization in what we used to call internal communications, which I much prefer calling workplace communications. But there were so many public relations companies, ad agencies, et cetera, that call themselves one-stop shop. And they would do public relations, advertising, marketing, eventing, oh, by the way, and internal communications. There's just no ways you can do that. Internal communications, to be done properly, is a highly, highly specialized field. And it requires much different skill set and a much different application to marketing, advertising, and targeting your external audiences. So one of the things that struck me early on in my career in public relations is I read a book by the doyen of UK advertising, David Ogilvy, the founder of Ogilvy Mather. And it was called Confessions of an Ad Man. And in that book, he made a statement which hit me right between the eyes. He said, I know that 50% of my advertising is wasted, but I don't know which 50%. And I thought, wow, I don't want to be in a profession. I've got a very, very loose scientific background. So I don't want to be in a profession where I know that 50% is wasted, but I don't know which 50%. So immediately I said, I've got to get past that. And that's when I said that the only way to know that is to introduce tight research. So the minute you put out a communication, you go in and you look at it, at how did people receive it? What did they feel about it? What was their reaction? What is their feedback? And you use that feedback to inform the next message that you're going to send out, which is slowly but how we developed our full circle business communication model, which has 4 buttons. And the first button is content, and that's just what you say. And then it's process, about how you say it. What do you use? What channels do you use? Call it channels, call it vehicles, platforms, whatever you want to call it. But how do you get that message out? And then the third button is feedback. What do people say about it? And then the final button is then analysis, which is all very well having feedback, but what does that feedback mean? Because very, very often the feedback's not self-evident. You have to dig a little bit down. I'll give you an example. We were doing research in a sugar plantation in northern KZN. And the guys now, with sugarcane, once you start cutting, you have to keep on going because they sell it by weight. And once you start, it dries out. So once you start going, they work day and night until they finish cutting. And the guy's saying, we need more light. And we couldn't figure out why would they need more light to just cut the cane, until we figured out via a friend of mine who happened to work in the hospital that during the cutting, there are a large number of snake bites. So the guys just couldn't see the snakes. So that's the sort of connection that we make through analysis of feedback. So I can give you plenty of other instances. That's quite a in your face horrendous one, but I thought I'd mention that because it really is stock, and it just gives you it just shows you how important communication can be and how important analyzing the feedback from communication can be. So here I was sitting with an option of doing external communications or internal communications. It was a no-brainer for me, because in internal communications, I've got a living laboratory where I can try something out. And literally within 24 hours, I can tell you, well, how did that go? Whereas if you put out an advert, you have to bring in some kind of agency that's going to analyze it for you. And 6 months later, they tell you what you know already. So I didn't see that worked all that well. And that's very evident in the advertising industry, that the time lag between the communication and the feedback is not always that immediate. That's one of the reasons why some adverts are so successful, and other adverts that people think are going to be successful absolutely bomb. I don't want to sort of point fingers, but there was a case recently where people decided they wanted to make their milk blue. And they obviously didn't get feedback on that, because they did through social media, but they obviously never tested it. So that's the sort of, without pointing fingers, because everybody makes mistakes. But that's the point. The point is to be able to pinpoint your mistakes very, very quickly. Social media has helped a lot, but the problem with social media is you can never really trust it, as we know. because of all the fake news that flies around. Whereas the research we do, although we never name people, we ask people questions and they give the feedback anonymously. The one thing we do know is that those people actually exist and that they work in that situation and that they have a vested interest in that situation. So that's the difference between that and social media. So tell me if I'm going along a sort of a winding path here. Perhaps you might
Graham, I
want
can
to.
hear you're absolutely passionate about your business. And, hence I was quite excited because this is a concept that we take for granted. I mean, we all take for granted that people or leaders know how to communicate, but it's an art form. And, over my career, I found communication to be an absolutely vital part or a link between great plans and ideas and what eventually gets done and how well it gets done. I want to pick up on something just for purposes of clarity, and I want to hear your view on it. The term communication versus engagement. From your point of view, can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, engagement became a big buzzword about 4 or 5 years ago. Okay, suddenly all engagement. And then I asked a client, because I was a little bit puzzled about this, what exactly does engagement mean? And they said to me, it means communication. We're engaged, we're communicating, therefore we're engaged. And I thought, well, so just, in other words, you're just supplementing one term for another, but I don't know, I see it differently. So the way I sort of came up, they said to me, okay, you tell us, then how do you see it? You're the expert. So I thought, oh, okay, fine, that put me on the spot. But then I thought about it and I came up with an analogy. I said, let's look at a steam engine, okay? A steam engine's got 3 elements, okay? It's got water, it's got fire, and it's got steam, which then used to be. So I said, well, I think that engagement is almost a passive form. So you can be engaged and not actually do anything about it. I can say, oh, I love working for this company. I know everybody's name. I know their kids. I'm really engaged. I come to all the office parties. But how do you translate that into the steam which drives the engine? So I saw engagement as the passive form of steam, which is water, in the engine, that is, okay? And the action is the steam which drives the piston. Now, how do we get from water to steam? By fire. So communication is the fire which heats up the water, which turns passive goodwill into active goodwill. So that's how I see the difference between communication and engagement.
Thank you, Graham. And part of communication and engagement is, of course, around active listening. So from a communication perspective, as organizations, we're often quite good at putting out the information. And when we talk about the workplace, and when I was trying to understand more about, what you do in your business, it's most certainly about the two-way feedback. Talk to us a bit about active listening and the role it plays in effective communication in the workplace.
Well, look, I think that you're 100% right. And I think I'm going to go back to my model to say that there are 4 buttons, okay? And the one button is what you say, the other one is how you say it. Now, to a large extent, many communications companies leave it there. And in fact, many communications are left there. It's a case of that, what do you mean you don't know? I sent you an email. Your problem, not mine. And that, of course, is incredibly bad communication. You have to have those other buttons. There has to be a response and then the analysis of the response. One of the things that we always talk about is the 3-way step, okay? And if I say to you, right, shall we meet for coffee at 2 o'clock? And you say, yes. And I just shut up. you have no idea whether I heard your yes or not. So there has to be the third step, which is fine, see you at 2:00. And that completes the communication. So the 3-step process is absolutely essential in all communications, which is reflected in our model. And what we try and do is we try and take the ordinary and make it extraordinary. The ordinary is how we communicate. Making it extraordinary is how you translate that into a form of mass communication, yet at the same time keeping that person-to-person communication alive. And the way we structured it with people pictures, just to briefly go back to my August days, when we found out that people pictures motivated people to engage in the communication, to give goodwill to the communication. We sort of had an idea, because a chap by the name of Bowlby in England wrote a paper way back in the late 60s about the attachment theory. He said that basically the attachment theory was that we all attach to people from the time we're small. Our mothers attach to us by looking at us very closely, holding us and all that sort of thing. And that is the basis. In psychology, it's called proto-communication. And that's the basis of how we communicate. But we carry that right through our lives. And the human smile is without a doubt the most powerful form of communication that there is. It's absolutely universal. And it doesn't matter what color, culture, or language you speak. If you see someone smiling, you know that they're smiling. You don't have to be told anything different. So we use that, and it goes very deep into our human psyche. It goes down many generations, or more than generations. And that's what we use in our communication. We use people smiling, people faces to get messages across, and especially to get what you're talking about, that human touch feedback that you need, and to what do you think? What do you think? And it's so much easier to get that feedback when you see a person who's asking you that, rather than an anonymous letter which says, please give me your feedback on this. I mean, you know what? I mean, who are you going to give the feedback to? The writer of the letter. Well, what does the writer of the letter look like? I've never seen him. I've never seen her, you know. So if you see, it all ties in. So, and I think that there's a lot more psychology behind this. The mirror neuron theory, where we actually imitate actions that we see other people doing. I mean, to actually put it very succinctly, if you're sitting at a supper party and somebody's telling a story, you for that moment you're attaching to that person, and that person picks up his glass of wine, the whole table pick up their glass of wine. It's actually, you can check it out, it goes without saying. And so that's these are all the underpinning neurological theories that we have been working on for years, and which I was fortunate enough to be asked to lecture at the University of Cardiff's Communication School about the connection between neuroscience and communication. And we've done a huge amounts of research. Some time ago, about 5 years ago, we sponsored a master's degree. One of your questions is that how can we help our clients, both current and future? And one of the ways is we need to know what motivates people. So we sponsored this master's degree, and it was it basically, the thesis was about why do good people leave businesses? What motivates them to leave businesses? And the antithesis of that, the opposite, why would people want to stay in a business? And there were three distinct questions, and the three motivational key points are: one, autonomy. People like to know that they have got some kind of control over what they do, that they're not being micromanaged, that they're not simply pitching up at work and turning screws. Two, competence. They want to know that they are receiving enough training, that they're moving forward, that they are actually improving themselves so that they can improve their situation in the workplace and their lives in general. And the third one is relevance. They need to know that they belong to something that is much more than just coming to work and getting a check. Now, that's really, really interesting. I mean, you actually see this in why people support football clubs, for example. You know, it's something that's beyond them. It's a collective, and it's an ambition, and you celebrate the victories and you cry at the defeats, and it's a human condition. We are a collective. We are a collective species. We don't do very well on our own. We have to have communal goals. And that's really what communication is all about. Communication has two great objectives. One, to strengthen behavior that we like. And two, to change behavior that we don't like. And that's how we talk about getting everybody on the same page. But that's how you get people on the same page, by slowly strengthening the behavior you like and moving the people away from the behavior you don't like. And we use all sorts of techniques to do this. I've mentioned some of them, but our biggest point is that 4 points that we use. What do we say? How do we say it? What do the people think of what we've said? And how do we analyze what they think, which then informs the next round of what do we say? So we don't just simply, I want to tell them this. No, first of all, find out what do they want to hear. It's as simple as that. When you tell people what they want to hear, and they will always come to the party, you try and tell them what you want them to hear, and you're going to run up against resistance. Of course, you can get your own point of view across, but get it across in the context of listening, not just saying.
Yeah, you know, when you think about leadership, Graham, and risk management, you know, the difference between certainty and uncertainty when you're leading people is around what you say and how effectively you say it. And even if you are uncertain about where the future lies, what the right decision is, the fact that you are clarifying what the position is creates that much more certainty in those that are listening to you. So, you know, if we look at the full circle model of content, process, feedback, and analysis, can you share with us some case studies of how you have put this in action across your clients?
Yeah, sure. That's well. I'm going to take you to the Marmite factory in Unilever in the Midlands in the UK, in Burton-on-Trent. There were 780 people working at the Marmite factory. When we were asked to, they picked up work we'd done through Unilever South Africa, and they asked us to come and have a look, because what they had to do was they had to move a lot of those people out to different places, but they also had to trim their staff down. We had a 5-year contract with them, and during that 5-year contract, they were going to reduce from 780 down to about 85, 90. So there was going to be a lot of people who were either going to have to find new jobs or were going to go on the dole or whatever. And our job was to reduce the strike time, because they knew they were going to have trouble with the unions. And the first thing I did was to have a meeting with the unions and said, look, this is what is going to happen. We can stand on our heads, we can jump up and down, but this is going to happen. What's going to happen? So my job is to make it as painless as possible for everybody, to give everybody a chance, so that there's a possibility that we could actually they could find another job. They could go on another tangent. They could do something different, not just sit back in despair and say, I've lost my job. So what we did was we went out to every single one of them and said, okay, there was voluntary retrenchment, and we got those, and we told stories. And what we said to the people was, what are you going to do when you leave here? And it was amazing how people said, well, I've always wanted to be a silversmith, and now I'm going to take the little package I've got and I'm going to become a silversmith. And then we wrote stories. A year later, look what I've done, and so on and so forth. And I think that it's that type of positivity and listening to people. What are your great fears? These are my fears. So one of the biggest fears was, I don't know how to do any other job. So immediately we reported back and we said, come on, we've got to train these people. And that's what we did. And as a result, in 5 years, we achieved the reduction. We never had not even an hour's strike, not 1 hour's strike. So that was one example. Another example was Glencore Mining. Glencore Mining had a big problem with a mine in Kazakhstan, a zinc mine called Kazink. And they had a lot of fatalities in the mine, a large number, I think 26 in a year. And we were brought in, again, the South African connection, because as you know, that Glencore has quite a strong South African connection, and they'd seen work we'd done here. So they brought us in to have a look at what was going on in the mine. And they were communicating, but didn't quite like it. But I thought to myself, well, it's no good just communicating. We've got to find out why these accidents are happening. Because how do you start with your first button with what we're going to say unless you know what's going on? What are you going to say? You can't just suck something out your thumb and say, hey guys, don't kill yourselves. I mean, it's not going to work. So we analyzed, and I must say, I kept my analytics department up night after night. I would sit there and feed them information. And I said, come on, I need a common denominator. What is the common denominator between all of these deaths? And eventually they said, look, the only common denominator we can find is that, without exception, all of them had worked there longer than 2 years, but less than 5 years. I could not think of what that would be. And then one day it just hit me. They weren't reporting near misses. So for the first 2 years they worked in that mine, they were doing everything right. They were using their PPE properly. They were clipping on. They were avoiding any possible falls. But they got complacent. They got used to it. And complacency is a huge factor in safety. We've done it so many times. It's what we call acceptable complacency, but it's not acceptable. But that's how it comes across. I know you don't really need to do that because, we've done it 100 times, not going to, it's just added extras. And then they would, after 2 years and before 5 years, they would either have a near miss or there would be a fatality. But because they were not reporting the near misses, when I went to the guy and said, let me show you, let me see your near miss schedules. He said, no, we haven't got any. There no near misses. We don't. And that's what we said. So we started to say to the people, look, by reporting a near miss, you'll save your comrade's life. And we went into the village and we took pictures of all their kids and plastered them on the board and said, please come home safely, Daddy. And we ran, obviously, a communication program, which was all about safe work. We had a program, so the communication program was there, but the emotional program was there as well. The emotional connection, telling them, why should they do this? Why do you want to do this? There's got to be what's in it for me. And it's the stick and the carrot. And we actually turned that round. And within 3 months, they had one more fatality. And after that, they never had any more fatalities for the next 4 years. And they were having over 20 a year for years. So that worked quite well. So those are 2 instances where I think communication has made a huge, huge difference in people's lives. And I think that, it's funny, a long time ago when we did a sort of an in-house sort of seminar type thing, and we asked the question, what do we actually do? And somebody said, we communicate. I said, okay, we communicate, but that's not really what we do. And they said, well, we produce posters, we produce videos, we do this, we do that. And eventually somebody came up with the statement, we make people feel good about themselves. And that was an incredibly powerful statement. When I thought about it, We really did. There was a case where we were handling the old Glodina factory in KwaZulu-Natal, just outside Pietermaritzburg. And a lot of the people had worked for that factory for 20, 30 years. And a lot of them were illiterate. And we used our communication system to run a very, very tight ABET program for the people. And we basically introduced literacy using our communication system and our boards. And one day after we'd been doing this, the guys got their certificates and all that. An old guy came to me and he said, I want to thank you. He said, I've lived in this particular street ever since I was born. And he said that for the first time, I can read the name on the street. And that was terribly moving. And I thought to myself, yes, we actually do make people feel good about themselves. And I think that that is a huge motivational factor for us, is that I can honestly say we've saved lives and we can make people feel good about themselves. And it's a powerful weapon, if you want to call it a weapon, but it's a powerful tool.
You pointed out some really, really important pieces. And what I want to draw on is that the communication enables connection. And
Yes.
effective communication, from what I'm hearing from you, the more effective it is, it's measured by how authentically it's received. Because unless you connect with the human being, we can call them employees, we can call them customers, we can call them stakeholders. It's around converting the vision and the idea that leaders has, or a tactical approach to a certain objective or outcome, but creating the connection in people's minds of why. Why are you wanting to do what it is that you want to do? And when you're doing that across 10, 1,000, 10,000 people, it's about trying to make sure that you are appealing to something that binds everybody in that organization or everyone to that brand. So you've spoken about PR, you've spoken about advertising, you've spoken about health and safety departments. Graham, explain to us, when does full circle communications come into a project, an intervention, or program?
Okay, well, I think that one of the most important things is we don't work on interventions. We work on a retainer basis, and the reason for that is that one of the things that when we do before we go in and start, we always do a baseline communication survey, and we talk to people and we ask them questions. And one of the answers that come up over and over again is that management only communicates with us when they want us to do something, and that's because of interventions. So all of a sudden, hey, we need to get this line going faster. We better do an intervention. We better do a communication. And it's a little like a newspaper. A newspaper's got all sorts of different sections in it. It's got your hard news, it's got your editorial comments, but it also has your ordinary everyday stuff. And people go there and read the soft stuff sometimes. I mean, I know people who just go straight into the crossword puzzle, for example. And it's those everyday things that draw you into the communication. Communication is a habit. And unless you can create that habit, we don't even have, we have news boards and that, but we have what we call nodes of communication. We want people to be in the habit of going there daily, every day, getting communication. So the communication's got to be regular. If you just suddenly do it when the management wants something, people see through it immediately. But if you do it on an ongoing basis, when the hard questions come up, when the hard discussions come up, it's much easier to introduce them because people, A, are used to communicating, B, they know there's goodwill behind it. So it's not just a case of me coming in now and saying, oh, no, I want to be nice to you now because I'm going to ask you to do something horrible. And that's one of the reasons why we were employed for 5 years at Unilever, rather than just come in and do an intervention and leave. So so I think that is the answer to you. I think that I think that at any time people see the need for communication in the business, that's the time when we should get involved. And and once we start, we should stay involved. I'm not saying we, must sort of like stay with us forever, but there's got to be an ongoing communication system. You cannot just do it sporadically, and that's really important.
Graham, you've got an impressive portfolio of clients in South Africa. Can you share with us You know, what trends have you seen? So you've been in this game for a long, long time in various spaces. And our communication modes have certainly changed. You referred to social media and the emergence of social media as a communication tool. And over 2020, and certainly now, social media is very, very helpful in trying to get the message across. And you made such an important point about the benefits of a visually driven communication, which appeals to the senses, right? So you understand the message that much easier. Yeah, the question is, share with us what were the trends and how are they changing? What type of trends are you seeing becoming more effective these days?
Okay, that's very, very pertinent right now. Look, COVID has changed communication. There's no question about it. In the first place, 2/3 of the people we were communicating with in the factories on a regular basis are now working from home. So somewhere along the line, we've got to be able to connect with these people in a very different way to what we were doing day after day after day. But at the same time, we know that the impact of printed communication that you look at and do is much bigger than any communication you're going to get on a 2x2 screen, 2x2-inch screen. So you don't get the emotional connection on screen-based communication. So what do? You can't ignore screen-based communication. Absolutely important. You can't ignore social media. Absolutely important. So what we did was, but you still have to have that point. People have still got to feel that they're part of an organization. In my own experience, in my own business, a lot of our people are working from home. All our designers are working from home. Our whole photographic department's working from home. Our video department's working from home. They don't need to come into office every day. But what was really important, and I did my homework internally. I spoke to people and said, how do you feel about not having come to office for 6 months? And they said, we miss just seeing people. We miss being part of that organization. So we can't have them all in the same place at the same time. We've shrunk our premises because of, obviously, like everybody else, shrunk income. But what we've done is we've created what we call the mothership concept. So now you've got the mothership and you've got a whole lot of little scout ships, okay? But the mothership, you can come and dock at the mothership and you walk into an area, you part of that, your name is on the board, your face is on the board, you're still part of that. So even though you're not there, even though you're a long way away from it, you are part of that organization. And that's what we want to create. We say, yes, you've got to have mixed communication. I was just reading on a very, very sort of low-key opinion poll, and following COVID, would you prefer to work 100% at home? Would you prefer to come back to work? And about 90% of people said they want to have a mixed model. They want to have a mixed model of working at home and come back to work. Now, the question I'm going to ask is this: of all companies, why do people want to come back to work? I think that if you did that research in your own department, in your own business, you'd find that that's true. It's a truism, but it is true. Why do people want to come back to work? And it's that thing, the third one I gave you, remember, autonomy, competence, and relevance. The people start to feel isolated when they are simply working with their laptops or their desktops, and they're working at home and they get up and that is their world. And seeing even Zooms and all that, it's not the same. It does not replace the actual one-on-one. And we can stand on our heads, we can do anything we like. One-on-one communication, where one person stands and talks to another, is the most powerful form of communication that there is. And our business has replicated that one-on-one, whereby we can use the techniques of a one-on-one in a multiple way and to getting to a number of people. And I think that we can't lose sight of that. It's absolutely imperative that we stay with the one-on-one concept. But obviously we can't do it like we used to do it. So we've got to have that mixed solution.
Graham, if businesses choose to go this route of engaging Full Circle to assist with internal communications and develop a communication strategies that is that much more effective, can you share with us how that journey would unfold with your clients?
Yeah, certainly. Firstly, what we would do is we engage with the client and have a look and talk to people and see where their communication is at the moment. We would do our research before we put our communication system into place. Remember, our top button of what we're going to say has got to be informed. Obviously, the client's going to tell us, these are our burning platforms. These are what keeps us awake at night. And we want you to handle that. And we will introduce those definitely very, very quickly. But in order for us to really be effective, we've got to have a baseline. So we would do that. We would then say to them, okay, this is what we've done. This is what we suggest. And what we do is we do that research at no cost to the client. We go in and we do a complete research. We do a complete a presentation of what we found and what we suggest. This is what we found. That in our experience, this is how we get over this and that and that. Each place is different. Every factory, you can't pay by numbers. Every factory has got different processes and different problems. It might be transportation. It might be this, might be that. But you have to find out what those are before you can just bomb in and do a communication. So that's what we would do. We then say to a client, okay, here's what we found. This is what we suggest. And up to you now, you take it from there. If you want to, we'll take it further and then we'll negotiate the contract. Or if you don't, we'll say, thank you very much. You can have our research and we'll walk away.
Graham, thank you very much. And I mean, the psychology of communication is a field that I'd like to unpack with you further, but we won't have time for that today. Graham, where are your operations? How can people get hold of you?
Well, our head office is in Cape Town, and we're in the directory at 082 776 7713, which is a direct line to me, or 021 552 4166, which is our line to our head office in Cape Town. But we're on a website. You can find us on our website, Full Circle Business Communications, and would love to hear from you guys.
I'm not quite finished with our conversation. Something I really want to ask you is around this commodity of trust, which there's a huge deficit globally around trust in communication, in media reports. What do you believe? What don't you believe? And of course, you alluded to the fact that working from home and a remote form of working now, because you can't see people and because you don't have the leaders or the managers standing right in front of you or sitting around a team table, for example, it makes it that much more difficult to kind of trust what is being said. Speak to us about communication and trust and what you found in the work that you do.
Well, the way we operate is our client services associates actually work very, very closely with our clients. They are on site 3-4 times a week. Everybody knows them and they get to know everybody, but they're seen as being hierarchically neutral. They're like a telephone. They're just there to communicate. They don't have any agenda. People know that they're not management. They know that they're not trade union. They're actually just there to communicate. So we build our trust by people knowing us and trusting us. In terms of the communication trust, I think that it's really important to be able to put a name that you know onto any communication, which is one of the reasons why we say when we put our communications out, we put the picture of the person who is saying it with that communication, whether it's a flip thing on a cell phone, or whether it's a notice on a board, or whether it's a magazine publication. It's important to have person who is speaking, have them there, because that is such a commitment. You can't hide behind anonymity. You are who you are. Everybody knows who you are. So it's not the same as having some anonymous person just posting on the internet. I think that our system, and I think that anybody who examines our system will understand that there is an inherent trust in the system. Because of our commitment to it, and because of the transparency that we bring to it in terms of who is saying this. So for me, it's no good saying this, you guys should do this. We say, Mr. X says you guys should do this. See, there's a subtle difference. And I think that's the difference, is to actually attribute communication to people who everybody knows. If you can't attribute the communication to somebody people know, it isn't a communication. Not in today's terms anyway. And you're right, people are going to mistrust it.
Graham, I think what's lifted most for me from this conversation is around the intentionality around communication and communication strategies. And part of that intentionality is really to solve problems or provide direction or provide clarity, not from one perspective, but from an informed basis. So your four-prong approach of content, process, feedback, analysis is a really, really important and interesting one. Easy to understand theoretically, and hence we very pleased to have businesses like Full Circle Business Communications available to lead organizations and leaders through these processes that sometimes are quite sensitive, right? So communication could be telling the good news and marketing your products, but it could also come into the form of crisis management. And I guess 2020 most certainly has made people look more closely at how they communicate. What are they saying? Where do they get their information from? And most importantly, the so what. You've said something, and like you said, what is the feedback? What is the feedback telling us? So Graham, thank you for a really fascinating conversation today. And I'm sure we can carry on for much longer, but I'll allow listeners to contact you directly. So please go to the Full Circle Business Communications website. Graham, direct contact details for yourself?
082 776 7713.
Brilliant. Graham, thank you so much for sharing your time with us and telling us more about your business. Listeners, thank you for joining us today. I experienced some sound feed problems, and if you did, we do apologize. Theo will try his best today when he uploads this recording to try and even out the sound. So Graham, you take care. Listeners, you take care too. And remember that communication is vital to effective outcomes. Goodbye.